Tyson, you've been your eyebrows.
I flick between different feelings around this because
share, brother.
You know, I think this is all true what we're saying, and we're frustrated by this because of our sort of nuanced understanding of you know, what the wound is for. You know, like we have cultural understandings about this, but in the world, it's different. You know, you're either going, it's always, as with everything in modernity, there's polar opposites. So you're either going, oh my God, you know, intergenerational trauma, you know, we're going to tiptoe around this one forever. This is a survivor. So we got to you know, we got to treat her differently, et cetera, et cetera. You got that on one side. And on the other end, it's just like, you know, pull your socks up, boy. You know, go for a jog. Why don't you go for a jog? You know, there's that kind of, bootstraps kind of suck it up. You know, that real kind of toxically masculine thing. And I think that's where a lot of people go. And that's the danger of being in this space and speaking about these things, is that I think it can attract, you know, a lot of people who are coming in bad faith, seeking affirmations around their kind of almost crypto-fascist sort of ideas that can help them remove the victim and remove their empathy from their mind, you know. So, you know, empathy must be there at the same time. So I switch back and forth sometimes until the frame sort of stabilizes and I get back into my story, you know, because you're in that story. So everything in our Aboriginal world here, it has lore, L-O-R-E, story for it, you know. And I know we don't have a word for trauma or suffering in our languages like that. We don't have those concepts. Those are things we've learned from missionaries in the last couple of centuries. You know, and so in our stories, there's not a lot of social justice that goes on either. You know, a wrong action that's a damaging action, you know, that stands in creation as a story, you know, forever. It's a disturbance that usually creates increase in the system. And so you don't, you know, so you have this, you have someone doing evil, and then that person is usually transformed in some way and stands forever as a monument, you know, like a hill or an animal or certain features that appear on an animal through that mutation, you know. And those people aren't hated forever either, you know, or punished forever. Those people are often revered, you know, and you have that animal as your totem, or that hill as your sacred place. But the same goes for the victim. The victim is also transformed by that calamity. And that victim also becomes a feature in the landscape, or a feature in the DNA of a species. You know, that there's a bird called a galah that keeps that flat head and blood red on its chest, you know, forever from the wound that it took. You know, if the freshwater crocodile steals the wife of the saltwater crocodile, and you know, there's not a happy ending where the villain gets punished, that the freshwater crocodile like kills him, you know, because he comes around to get his wife back, and the freshwater crocodile just kills him and smashes the end of his nose off, which he has to carry forever in the mutation of that species, and yeah, it just kills him, and that's it. You know. And then there's another story that goes out that from Creek, where he drags himself off to die, but he had a lot of love magic, you know, that crocodile. He was always really good with the ladies, and all that love magic was bleeding out of him into that place. And that smell, I guess, it brought in all the women from thousands of miles around all came along to that creek and followed it along. And that's that story now, is that love magic story in that creek that sort of leaked out of this being. You know, so I guess what I'm saying is we don't have that. Then there's no sort of victim and evildoer. It's just justice is what you do communally, and there are rituals around this. But yeah, we don't have that other thing. And we didn't have that until recently. But we also have quite a middle class now in the arts and in the academy, and there's a lot of trauma-informed practice going on there. And I get that too. Because we have historical IOUs, and it's hard not to clutch those as you walk into every conversation. You know, it's difficult. And we've spent the last 30 years trying to learn and acquire the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. And now we've arrived at the master's house and he doesn't live there anymore. He's in Estonia building smart cities now. And, he's not in the master's house anymore. His nephew's in the house and he's an ally. And he has a belly button ring and yoga abs and dreadlocks. And he keeps a shaman in the living room and invites you to come in and have an ayahuasca ceremony with him, And so it's the master's nephew's house, and you feel bad standing on the porch with all your tools and you come to smash the place up, So that's about where I'm at with that. Yeah. I won't go too long. I just thought I'd do a story there.
No. I'm sure we could.
There's more story.
The three of us had this conversation about yoga on a slave ship, right? And breath work and the Sahara Desert and solar panels. Was it solar panels?
Oh, that's the story. Yeah, that's the framing story.
Is that the framing story you're looking for?
Well, it was the other day. I don't know if it is anymore. You feel for that, but it's a good story.
No, it's fine. I think this is beautiful. Just as well, there is Vanessa would know this as well. That's I remember sitting with a babalawo many years ago, and I had this image of a powerful shaman-like being, and who would throw cowries in the air, and how it lands would tell a story. Like the divinatory practices of the babalawo are a thing to behold. And I remember sitting there, and some people came in. It's not a private affair, It's not like a psychotherapist and a client in more industrialized Western settings. A village kind of crowds into the room. There isn't in the practices that I've sat with, there isn't like, oh, we need some privacy to share these things. No, your story is already a matter of public concern. And so I saw these people sitting with a babalawo and telling about issues around childbirth or hunger or some kind of sickness or something. And the posture, I was looking not just for content, I was looking for the arrangements of bodies in the room. I was noticing the cobwebs on the wall. There was nothing healthy about the space. I saw bloodied cow horns and bowls filled with blood and a head of a chicken or something like that. It was revolting, right? and I remember, most especially, after this person had told the story, the babalawo kind of leaned back. The posture was that of, I'm not focusing on you, I'm focusing on, his posture was more like, who else is here, right? He was addressing and ministering and speaking to and hearing, not just the client in front of him. No easy sausages here. It was the entire field that was brought into the room. And then it made sense why sometimes the shaman would come with a knife to the bones or to the flesh of the person and might just make a wound, maybe trying to kill out or make incisions to the bubble wrap, Vanessa, right? what does that, what, maybe there isn't a question here. It's just a noticing and how these things come together, that we're dealing with fields and principalities, not individuals, not clients. And this is not a dismissal of the individual. It is a deeper form of accountability, right? It's the individual's indebtedness to the village, and not a village of human beings, a village of forces. Yeah. I don't know what you want to say about that. That isn't a question.
Yeah, the piercings in some of the ceremonies are symbolizing of the opening of your body, of the membrane of your body to the wider body you're a part of. And yes, this is something that we have lost, I think, in Western societies, because well-being and wellness is sold as a state where that is necessarily pain-free. Whereas when you go through the ceremonies, you know that healing is painful, but the healing is not necessarily the healing of this cell. It's the healing of everything else you're connected with that depends on the opening of the wound. But I hear what Tyson is saying too, in terms of, yes, we need that lesson back, and it can easily be weaponized in a very nefarious way, in a colonial way, where you either fetishize the fragility of the bodies that need to be protected, or you fetishize the pain or the wound itself. So we need to bring the discussion out of this false choice. It's not the wound.
It's not an either or.
It's not an either or. It is something else. So, but the way that modernity works with dialectics, there's a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis. That's why we tend to go into, it's either A is bad and B is good.
Or B is bad,
And A is good, yes. So we have to be just careful to put it on the table, as there is an aspect, I think, of wounds and wounding that can be extremely helpful in what we need to do right now. There's an aspect of holding the difficulty and the pain without feeling immobilized or overwhelmed that we will need to confront and develop as we face storms and stay with the trouble together. So it will be painful, but depending on how you put it on the table, people will attach to the pain. I've seen that happening too. And the drowning in the pain becomes the signaling of virtue. And that is a trap.
I mean, this is also in psychedelic culture, right? It's
Absolutely.
It's the instrumentalization of the high. It's the arrival. We arrive eventually, right? So,
spiritual bypass, spiritual, emotional, social, intellectual
that's
bypass.
A whole lot of conversation.
And it's like an ecstatic loop. And, grief, trauma can be like this. It can be an ecstatic loop that people get in. I know Vanessa just mentioned being immobilized, making sure you're not immobilized. But I think if that's genuinely coming through you and your web of relationships, that you have to stop, and fall and stay there. That's all right. But you got to make sure you don't get caught in that feedback loop and keep cycling round and round in your trauma. And I think if we celebrate the trauma, or on the other end of that continuum, celebrate survival, it's still spiritual bypass. So we don't have those opposites. We don't have those binaries. It's I think the closest anthropologists call it dyads. What we have in Australian Aboriginal culture instead, it's two opposites being just like two sides of the same coin. And that you need both, and the tension and a push-pull and a unity between those two things rather than a continuum. I was just thinking about, I got caught in one of those loops. One of those loops this year, because my sister was murdered, and we had to wait for months until the funeral. You know, like we're very, very good at death here because, you know, there's at least 2 funerals every year, you know, that most families have to go to. And it's potentially very traumatic. But we have very good grieving rituals that get you through that and lift everybody up and increase social cohesion and make you healthy, you know. But we couldn't do that for months because it was a murder and the police took a long time to do the investigation. So it wasn't, they could only release the body after they'd finished the investigation, and it took months. So we were kind of stuck. And because I'm living away from home, quite a long way away from home, I was on my own for that. So I did go round and round in that cycle. But then, you know, went home for the funeral, and we had all the things that you do, you know, which might seem strange to some people, but, you know, those things really help. And so us as the siblings, we had to bring in all of the different groups, families, clans that are associated with her, you know, even so in-laws group, that's a different group, etc. So each group would be lined up. And then us mob, we had to line up alongside them and put our hands on the shoulder of one person and bring them in. So that pairs us, you know. So we bring each group in that way. Lots of different things. Then we take turns in different groups to come and you know, put our hands around at the body there and big, deep, loud, disturbing death wail sounds. We do that for a long time until it's out, you know. But it's, if you're doing it on your own, it's really traumatic, you know, and you wound yourself. You might hit yourself in the head, you know, or something like that, and really feel it. But if you're on your own, that can go forever. But all together with that, it's there's something about it. There's a tonal vibration that comes from that frequency, I think, in that wail, where when it's all those voices together, it just takes it out of you. It takes that poison of that wound, you know, that festering wound right out of you. It's good to feel that, you know. And then it's dancing, because we got to dance that totemic spirit, you know, back to its place in the land. And so we're doing the songs, dances, and there's that thing where you're all clapping together, you know, a couple of hundred people all together at once. It just kind of, I don't know, it does something, but it certainly breaks you out of that loop. But then there's a lot of different rituals that have to happen for a year, you know, and for at least a year, we can't say her name. We can't say any word that sounds like her name. Like, you know, so if we say a word that sounds like her name, we have to use a replacement word, like Watuman. If someone's got the same name, no one can say their name anymore. We've got to call them Tarpich. You know, if we refer to the deceased, we call them Walwal. You know, you don't say the name. There's no image. All of her belongings are buried. You know, so it's like this, you know, you can't have any of that attachment, because then that spirit, the shadow spirit, will come and linger and sniff around and make everybody sick, you know. Yeah, so it takes a long time. But those rituals we have, and that's what I thought of at the start when Vanessa telling her story as well. You know, those rituals we have, these are, you know, are these trauma informed? You know, that they're certainly not. They're informed by the reality and an acceptance of the reality, and how to come into that, and all the energy, spiritual, physical, everything else, and the unnameable things that go with that. It's making sense of that good story, you know, all together. Otherwise, you got nothing, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.